Guys, this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Wrestling Collector Shop. The next time you're looking to add the newest wrestling figures to your lineup, you've got to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Started by collectors for collectors around the globe, Wrestling Collector Shop has been serving fans the latest and greatest in wrestling action figures since 2002. Whether you're looking for basics, elites, or ultimates, Wrestling Collector Shop should be your first stop the next time you're looking for wrestling figures. So make sure to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com and use code SWOGGLE to save yourself 10% on your order. Again, that's 10% off with code SWOGGLE only at WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Going Postl. As you see in the title, it's another small talk. This week, WWE Hall of Famer, wrestling legend, absolute wrestling legend. As I say in his intro, if you name the wrestling company, he has worked for the wrestling company in a major role. Eric Bischoff, Eazy-E, a guy that has become a friend of mine over the last few years. We had him in for Water City Wrestling Con a few years ago, and he was just incredible. And we've just always connected and shared a laugh every time we're around each other. So I'm very, very happy to have him on this week's episode. But before we go any farther, this podcast right here is brought to you by our friends over at Wrestling Collector Shop. Use code SWOGGLE to save yourself 10% at WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Guys, make sure to follow us on all forms of social media at Going Postl Pod. And follow me at Dylan Postl on all forms of social media, X, Twitter, whatever you call it, Instagram, all that jazz. YouTube.com/Dylan Postl for this podcast right here in free video form, plus road diaries, unboxings, and many, many other fun videos over at youtube.com/Dylan Postl. All things me at DylanPostl.com. Merchandise, everything you need, DylanPostl.com. ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle. All of the designs from this show, from my wrestling world, everything. SwoggleAuction.com. Got to hit that one up. Whatnot. The next Whatnot stream is going to be coming very, very soon. I got a huge, huge amount of items signed at the big event a couple weeks ago. They're going to be on the next Whatnot stream. I got some great Khali/Hornswoggle dual autos that are going to blow your mind. Guys, SwoggleAuction.com for a free $10 credit to use on my next Whatnot stream. SwoggleAuction.com. Sign up today. Now, guys, me and Eric covered everything in this, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear all about it. But before we go any farther, one more real quick thing. Ad break. Are you a fan of Disney, Pixar, Jurassic Park, The Office, or even WWE? Or maybe you just want a sleek and comfortable patterned shirt? Then you need to check out Roosevelts.com. RSVLTS.com today. Roosevelts makes the most eye-catching and comfortable shirts going today. Whether it's button-ups or polos or hoodies or even hats and everything in between, Roosevelts truly has something for everyone. Made for those with the love of sports, pop culture, and so much more. And above all else, having a kick-ass time. This clothing is for the bold and fun, for those who dare mighty things. Roosevelts.com. Check them out. Guys, another small talk. And as you can see by the title, he is a WWE Hall of Famer. A man that you name the wrestling company, he's worked there in a major role. And most importantly, a heck of a brewer of beer. Hi, Eric. How are you?
Good, Dylan. How are you, buddy?
Immediately thought of the intro, and I was like, I gotta mention the beer brewing. Easy for me to say. And was that just a knowing you as I do? I enjoy a beer. I'm gonna make it myself to what I like.
It wasn't so much that, to be honest with you, bud. It was, I live in this town called Cody, Wyoming. It was founded by Buffalo Bill Cody. And people don't realize it, but like long before Barnum and Bailey and Disney and Escapades on Ice and long before professional wrestling, there was this cat by the name of Buffalo Bill Cody who was a legitimate frontier hero. He was 14 years old. He rode in the Pony Express to try to provide for his family because his father had died as a result of a stab wound, and he was the oldest son, so there was no other options. He started riding the Pony Express at 14. He joined the military as a scout and then became a colonel. He won the Medal of Honor, I believe. Really fascinating guy, was very much involved in the Plains Indian conflicts and made a name for himself in some respects that way. And when it was all said and done, Buffalo Bill Cody packaged his experience in the Wild West, and he was the subject of dime novels and all kinds of, literature of the time, so to speak, because the West was a just giant adventure for people in the East. So, long story short, Buffalo Bill Cody took the show on the road, much like professional wrestling has done, and not only brought a lot of actors, but famous, people like Annie Oakley was a part of the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, and many, many others. But he also brought Native Americans, some of whom he was campaigning against during the Native American wars in the 1800s, like Sitting Bull, for example. And he would take this entire show, which was a spectacularly large show that included horses and buffalo, and he put them on a boat, took them over to the UK, and performed for the King and Queen of England. And here, where I live, all over the world, he performed this Wild West show. He was at one point in Paris, many times. At one point in time, at the turn of the 20th century, Buffalo Bill Cody was arguably the most famous American in the world, and he was recognized as a showman. And this town is named after him. And there's about, Yellowstone Park is about 45 miles down the road from where I live. In order to get there anywhere from the eastern part of the United States, you have to drive through Cody, Wyoming. So the whole idea behind the beer, this is where the wrestling promoter me comes in. I'm thinking, I got 2 million people coming through this town every summer to go look at Old Faithful for whatever reason. It's really anticlimactic, believe me or not. Believe me when I tell you.
I remember going as a kid, Eric. I remember going as a kid and going, "All right, we're gonna wait, and it's gonna be the coolest thing ever." And then it goes, and I go, "When does it go again? Like, when does it go? It's gonna go again, right? And there's gonna be more." And Dad's like, "Nope, time to get back in the van. Let's go." Like,
so here's my behind the beer story.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, the wrestling promoter of me is thinking, I want to sell everybody that comes through Cody, Wyoming, because they all stop in Cody for like at least an hour to shop and eat or drink or whatever. I said, I'm going to send everyone I can home with a 6-pack of Buffalo Bill Cody beer, a bumper sticker, and a T-shirt. And if I can do that, that'll be fun. So my wife and I sat on the front porch of our house and created this idea for this beer brand and found the brewer and went through the whole trademark process, which, cost me close to $250,000 to prove I was right. Went through all that process, and to this day, and I'll never make a dime off this product. I'll never, ever make a dime off of it. But to this day, if you go to Cody Craft Brewing right here in Cody, Wyoming, you too can enjoy a world-famous Buffalo Bill Cody beer in honor of our country's first real promoter.
The craziness of the backstory of Buffalo Bill Cody, and you then keeping it going in the beer, and then having like not only the pro wrestling mindset, but also you said the 6-pack and the bumper sticker and the T-shirt. I immediately thought of your neighboring state in Wall Drug. I was like, everyone has the Wall Drug bumper sticker. I've been to Wall Drug. Everyone has that in that area. So you are literally like the wall drug in Wyoming where everyone has to pass through and stop, they're gonna represent it then.
Yeah, and I went hog wild because I didn't know anything about the beer business. I was
Yeah.
completely, let's see, is there a better word than ignorant? Let's see, what does ignorant mean? Lack of information or knowledge. I was ignorant as fuck about the about the beer business. All I knew is I wanted to sell people bumper stickers, T-shirts, and six packs.
It's incredible.
So that's why I spent so much money trying to get the trademark, because I believed if I get this trademark, now keep in mind, this is back when the craft brewing business, we were going back to 2010. The craft beer business was on a huge upswing at that time. It's not anymore because big box has kind of taken over really distribution for micro beers. But at that time, it was like, oh man, if I get this trademark, it's a very cool label, dude. You should Google the Buffalo Bill Cody logo. It's incredible. And it was literally, I took it from a poster that was a part of the Buffalo Bill Wild West show in France. And it took place like 1905 or 1906. And because of that, the artwork for that poster became public domain, which allowed me to take that poster, make a couple little changes in it to include the beer brand, and now I have a piece of art, frankly, poster art from the turn of the 20th century from that tour as my label. It's very cool.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when approaching you, I about this sit down, I said, hey, this is going to be not the usual song and dance interview. And that's what I like to do with these is I don't want this because they just get tiring. The saying, hey, tell me about the first night with NWO. Tell me about when you debuted on Raw. No, I want to know the fun stuff that I've been thinking personally. And just things that if I'm thinking it means others are probably somewhere out there. So Nitro starts. Nitro begins the very early days. You guys are at Disney's MGM Studios. I am a Disney adult, as they call them. I'm a Disney fanatic. I want to know some of the backstory on that and how many times Brutus the Barber was late for Nitro because he was around the parks or something like that. Were there issues where guys were just like around the park and you couldn't find them? Or what was the working relationship with MGM Studios?
It evolved.
Okay.
Initially, there was one guy from Disney, and unfortunately, he was the decision maker, but he was part of a Disney corporate culture, and it was a lot of, even back then, very much groupthink. Unlike the television industry back then, which was still kind of the wild, wild west, and you could have one guy that could make a lot of different types of decisions. It was a much more buttoned up kind of corporate culture at Disney. So you had to go through a process in order to get approved to be on the lot, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, because it was professional wrestling, that comes with a certain stigma, as you know. And there were a lot of really well buttoned up Harvard, Yale, type execs from Disney that just didn't get how professional wrestling could possibly fit within the Disney brand, even as basically a vendor. There was a lot of people in Disney that didn't want wrestling on the lot because of their either accurate perceptions of what could go wrong, or because they just bought into the stigma. Either way, it was an uphill battle. But there was one guy there. His name was Bob Allen. He was the shot caller, but he still had to play well with others. But he was a real advocate for us. And I took it with David Crockett, came with me to handle the questions on the production side of things, physical production. I took David with me, and David and I sat down in front of 6 or 8 executives in the first meeting led by Bob Allen. And we made our presentation, did a little bit of Q&A. And got invited back for another meeting, this time with a smaller group. And they said, look, we want to try this, but there are certain parameters because of the nature of your product, because of the nature of the way we run our parks. Here's how this needs to work in order for us to give you final approval. And I'll button it up. I'll explain it quickly, but essentially it came down to they didn't want any of the wrestlers in character anywhere outside of the soundstage.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
out in the parking lot, going out to the car to get, well, that's fine. But they didn't want, Brutus the Barber Beefcake walking around in his ring attire anywhere on the park.
Yeah.
And not because it was Brutus, but anybody, Diamond Dallas
Correct. Yeah,
Page
yeah.
in his gear. Nobody in costume, in gimmick, anywhere on the park. And this is the weirdest one, they said, well, now again, this is our first time there, right? They said, now here's the other thing is we can't have, because we had a fairly significant production team at that point, and we had to bring in wrestlers that would allow us to produce 6 or 8 weeks worth of programming at one time.
Yeah.
So now instead of showing up with, say, 40 guys to shoot a show, I'm bringing 120 because we're producing.
Because there's so many weeks.
10
weeks
episodes
in the
while
can.
we're there.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a Marriott Residence Inn that was very close to the sound stage, and that's where we booked the whole place, or the vast majority of it, which was really cool because in a lot of the talent, they got in. They knew they were going to be in the same spot for a week, 10 days. A lot of them brought their families in, so they were working all day at the soundstage.
Yeah.
Families were in Orlando. At night, we would have a big barbecue at the Marriott Courtyard for all of the talent, staff, family, everybody that was
awesome.
there. It was actually very, very cool. It was one of the coolest things I was a part of that I didn't expect. But here's the kicker. In the mornings when we would show up at the soundstage, usually about 9 o'clock, to start shooting like at 10, we had to come in on buses because there wasn't enough parking because of the sheer volume of people we were bringing. So there was no parking. And when we brought the wrestlers in a bus, they wanted us to tape up the windows so people couldn't see the wrestlers coming onto the lot. Now I never figured that out. I still don't know why that, but that was like a big deal. Really? It's like they wanted us to sneak the wrestlers in and don't let anybody see them out on the lot, like in a real Disney park.
Yeah.
But out in the parking lot next to the soundstage is okay. But they wanted us contained. Now, that was in the beginning. Within the first year, they were allowing us to use backdrops from, right? But we just had to get over that fear because they didn't know.
The
all
stigma.
they knew was
Exactly what they read
what they read in the dirt sheets.
Yeah. The stigma of pro wrestling, that's always so horrible. It's such a horrible, horrible thing. It's funny that it was such a stay here, stay in your bubble, and then, this isn't so bad. Do whatever, essentially. Hands off.
Yeah, they didn't treat us like we were shooting porn.
Yeah.
But kinda.
Yeah.
I guess I think I know how that might feel because it was close.
Another crazy destination of sorts took Nitro, to the Mall of America. And in some of the craziest moments ever happened at the Mall of America. How does that, how is the thought of, hey, let's do it here. Let's just do it in the center of this hub of a place.
I think this is going to sound arrogant as hell, but I think that might have been one of the smartest decisions I've ever made without realizing I was making a smart decision. I made that call out of necessity. It wasn't by some cool visionary choice. If you go back and you look at WCW business back in 1995, if I'm going to produce a live show head-to-head with WWE, I cannot afford to only have 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 people show up in a 10,000-seat arena. First of all, if I'm producing a live show, a premiere, the debut episode, I'm going head-to-head with WWE. Here's what else can't happen. I can't have their show looking like it's a spectacular cutting-edge product and my show looking like 1979, Anderson, South Carolina. Yeah. I can't. I've got to have something that's, from a production value perspective, at least as compelling. Now, I knew, here's where the catch came in. In 1995, I wasn't sure I could put 3,500 people in an arena and make it look good. I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to take the risk of trying. I had people tell me, no, if we spend the money in promotion, if we buy this, we do this, we'll do this, people will come. And I'm going, no, I've been hearing that for about 3 years now, and I haven't seen it happen yet. So I'm not going to bet my last dollar on that strategy. And I thought, out of necessity, the Mall of America was still pretty new at the time. At the time, I think it was billed as the largest mall in the world or largest mall in America or some shit. Whether it was true or not, it was still kind of a tourist destination. People came from all over to experience it. I thought, okay, it's kind of like a theme park solution. I know there's going to be a lot of people there. I know wrestling makes a lot of noise. I know I got Hulk Hogan. I know I'm going to have TV cameras. All of those things attract attention. And having had been to the Mall of America, I knew that there was a space where we could put the ring on the first floor, and it would look like you're in this multi-level coliseum surrounded by spectators. Well, it's just an atrium, but if you dress it right and you fill enough people around it, it looks like a really cool, like modern day Roman Coliseum.
Yeah.
And while it's not as impressive as 15 or 20,000 people, it was different enough and cool enough to basically camouflage the fact that I couldn't draw a house. That's the truth.
You don't think about that of your premiere episode, you go into a building in a 10,000 seat building and you put 3,000 people in it, and this is your premiere episode. That's like, it looks like, what is this kind of, especially going against that competition. Now, no matter because how you shoot. Yeah.
Well, and if you've listened to my podcast, you'll hear me talk about my kind of strategy, I guess, brand strategy at the time, which was, I can't be better than WWE, but I can be different than them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if I can make different interesting, it might work. And I was forced to do something different than what WWE could put 5 or 10,000 people in an arena and make it look good. I couldn't do that, so I had to be different. I had to do something cool looking, but different than the way they did it. And it just was one of a long list of pretty basic things that I relied upon to make Nitro successful. Being better than, different than, less than. Those are your three options. You're either better than your competition doing what they do, you're less than your competition doing what they do, or you could be different. And I chose different.
So destination television spots turned into destination pay-per-views with Road Wild. One of the coolest and like most fun kind of ideas, I think. Let's do a show at Sturgis in Sturgis, South. Like, is that, in all reality, peek behind the curtain? You're a motorcycle rider. Is that a thought of, hey, let's hang out at Sturgis and then do a show there, so we have a reason to be there, kind of thing for a weekend?
That's the narrative. That's what the
of course.
That's what the Dave Meltzers and the dipshit dirt sheet writers all camp out on that narrative because they're too stupid to even think about what they're saying for a moment. And let's just play that out for a second, if we may. True, I have always enjoyed riding motorcycles since I was about 8. When I got my first mini bike. There's pictures of it in my book. I was the coolest kid on the block. I got bit in the face by a German Shepherd while I was a paper boy, and my family sued the people that owned the German Shepherd. And out of that lawsuit, I got enough money to buy a $600 mini bike. And that's how I got hooked.
That's what started it all.
That's how I got hooked on two wheels. And from that, I moved up to a Honda 160 Scrambler when I was about 14. Used that to get back and forth to work 2 years before I even got my driver's license. And then from the time I had my driver's license on, I probably have had a Harley since 1974.
Always had one.
Yeah. for the most part. Not in high school, I had Suzuki's and Kawasaki's and fast.
You've
stuff
always had a
'cause
bike.
I couldn't afford a Harley back then, but yeah, I've always had it. But here's the deal: if my motivation, selfishly, was to go hang out on Sturgis, ride my Harley, experience the Sturgis experience, why the fuck would I go with 60 wrestlers that I have to babysit, an entire production based in the middle of nowhere fucking South Dakota that's impossible to get to produce a live pay-per-view that has a percentage of failure due to nothing but fucking weather of about 60%? There would be a lot more fun ways for me to go indulge myself than going there to work my ass off, surrounded by people who hate me for bringing them there. No, it wasn't that.
The talent, the production and talent might hate you for being there, but I'm sure not all the bikers are happy that you guys are there.
No, bikers loved us, bro. Bikers
oh, really?
Loved us.
The whole thing? Really?
Oh, yeah. They loved it.
I would have thought they were like, they would have thought they were kind of cramping in there on their party or something. Okay, that's awesome. That's surprising. Okay.
No, they loved it, and so did the city leadership. The mayor,
of course,
was very helpful. The police chief, the state was very helpful in a lot of ways. So, no, it was a very successful experience, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. So when we went back year after year, it was not for a good time. But let me tell you what it was for. And this is the part that, dirt sheet writers and parasites and the scum that kind of live off the periphery of the wrestling business, they need that kind of narrative to feed their subscriber base. But are you still with me?
Yep, we're good.
All right. One of the biggest challenges that we had was creating and developing sponsorships that were significant enough to represent what the audience was really worth. We were drawing big numbers, but we weren't getting big sponsorships. So my idea was, let's go to where the sponsors are. You can send emails, you can send PowerPoints, you can make phone calls, you can have fakakta meetings, getting lunches and drinking martinis, all you want. But until you get in front of the right people who can actually see what's possible with professional wrestling, it's really hard to convince them. And again, it goes back to stigma, right? The perception people have of professional wrestling, particularly in the ad side and the sponsorship side of things. So I thought, I knew about Sturgis. I had never been to Sturgis prior, but I knew all about it. I grew up in Minnesota. You don't live in Minnesota and ride motorcycles and not know about Sturgis, right? So I always knew about it. I watched a lot of the coverage of it in the past. I knew that every major beer company, every major truck manufacturer, every major car parts manufacturer, the majority of them, the big ones, anybody that was targeting 18 to 49-year-old men with a lot of discretionary income, because that shit they're driving out there, they're running 30, 40, 50, 60 grand a copy. And oh, by the way, these are doctors, lawyers, and engineers dressed up like bikers on the weekend. Yeah. That's 80% of what Sturgis is. Mm-hmm. It's like cosplay for a good portion of them. And they're all money makers. So I thought, if I can't get them to come to me, I'm going to go to them, and I'm going to produce this pay-per-view, and I'm going to show these sponsors exactly what this brand can do. Yeah. And we did.
That's awesome.
Within 6 months, we had Valvoline. We had some major sponsors that would never really even engage in a serious conversation with us. So that was the reason why, a big part of it. The other part of it was, I realized, we went from 4 pay-per-views a year to 6 pay-per-views, 8 pay-per-views to 12 pay-per-views, and WWE followed our lead. We were the first ones to start expanding the pay-per-view schedule. And again, we did that out of necessity because WCW wasn't making any money anywhere else. Our live event business was the shit. We didn't have any licensing or merchandising. We had pay-per-view. That was it. So if I had to increase revenues, and I had a gun to my head to do that, the only way to do it was increasing pay-per-views. as we began to increase pay-per-views, it became clear to me early on that those pay-per-views had to have a personality. Each one of them had to be distinct. WWE was already doing a good job doing that. They had their tent poles, right? WCW hadn't. They hadn't done a good job doing that. So Sturgis, while I was increasing the number of my pay-per-views, I identified that opportunity as an opportunity to not only create a pay-per-view with a very unique personality because of its very unique locations. It's kind of like creating a character, right?
Oh,
With a
yeah.
character, it's how they dress and how they talk, but with a production, much like the series Yellowstone, it's about the backdrop. The location becomes a character. So that was my logic, and that's why I did it. It had nothing to do with me wanting to go ride around on my Harley looking at fat naked chicks eating hot dogs. That was not it.
So you talked about the insane crowd that comes with Sturgis. Then you move to the NWO stuff, and just the little thing that you did, the NWO, and then the insane like crowd reception that brought. But I want to talk about another kind of crazy environment that I don't know if you've talked a lot about, and that is ECW's One Night Stand, and your featuring in that, and how you felt going into that night, and like the crowd. That was the first like true feel. That ECW One Night Stand was the feeling of ECW. Like it was back for that night. And was it nuts to you even at the time of how passionate that crowd was? Or what was your takeaway from it?
How to describe that? It was the most unique feeling I think I've had, and a very pleasurable one because, and you know this, Dylan, and anybody that's been a performer can relate to it. In my particular life, I played a heel. My value as a performer was solely based on my ability to get people to hate me so that someone that they love could beat the shit out of me so that everybody feels better when they go home. That was my role. And I was pretty good at it. I had a lot of heat for quite a while, and I was able to spread it pretty effectively around pretty well. But by the time I got to WWE, my heat was still there, but it wasn't quite the same. It wasn't as intense. So I was still getting the reaction that Vince wanted me to get, Kevin Dunn wanted me to get, the talent I'm working with wanted me to get, but it wasn't as intense. And I could feel it. And it's kind of it's like feeling your body getting weaker, and you know it's happening, but you're not sure what to do about it. And that's kind of the way I felt about my character. I knew it was getting weaker. I knew my time in that role was going to, become shortened unless there was a way to get that heat. Keep it, I should say. And then ECW One Night Stand came along. And because of the real history and even the bullshit history, because most of the stuff that Paul Heyman said about me was completely bullshit, but he did it in such an effective way that he created an us versus them kind of energy that people bought into and believed in, so that heat was now palpable. So Steve Austin came in and buried me. Mick Foley came into ECW and buried me. I don't know if Jericho did it or not. But all these guys, all these big names that are passing through ECW on their way to WWE are getting over by putting heat on me. Right? Which is cool in a way. Now that I look back at it from that perspective, during the time I'm going, what the fuck is with you people?
I gave you. What did I do to you?
Fuck, find somebody else. But now I look back, it was kind of a compliment that guys felt like, oh, I know how to get it over. I'll bury Bischoff. That always works. But the ECW thing was like me stepping into the most familiar and intensely comfortable environment I've been in a while, because that heat is my validation as a pro. If I'm getting it, I'm validated. I'm doing my shit. and people are buying it and I'm good. This is what I'm made to do right now. When I'm not getting that feedback, I'm questioning my existence,
Mhm.
to be
Yeah, yeah.
honest, at some level. So when I walked in that ECW arena and that heat was so thick you could cut it with a chainsaw,
Did you expect it?
where I anticipated it, but I didn't anticipate it to the degree that it became a reality. And this is not tough guy talk at all because I'm 70 and that shit's way in my rearview mirror. But I grew up in Detroit. I got in a lot of fights and I got my ass kicked a lot. And then later in life, I learned how not to get my ass kicked. And I worked pretty hard at that. But during that period of childhood to adulthood in my mid to late 20s, one thing that I walked away from is because of where I grew up and how I grew up as a kid, as a child, I learned the difference when people talked about wanting to kick my ass and those that were intent upon it.
Okay.
There is a connection
Yeah.
that exists. There is a vibration between two individuals, or sometimes more, that is a different frequency of vibration when it's real. And I've always been able to distinguish bullshit from reality in that context. It was the first time in a long time that I've been in an environment like I was just out there in the crowd. There was no bodyguards around me. I think there was a couple wrestlers with me, but there was no like anybody around in case shit went south. And they were like from me to this jug of water away from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was standing there and I'm going, first of all, I was like basking in the fucking glow of real heat because it's better than sex. My wife didn't hear that. But maybe not better, but it's right up there. And I was just, it felt so good because it was a real, genuine heat and not, I don't mean to be dismissive, but it's not Pavlov dog heat.
Yeah.
Sometimes the wrestling audience becomes so conditioned and well trained, they show up at the arena knowing their role, just like it was handed to them in a script form. And that's valuable and it's important. And you got to work to get that level of engagement. But there's a difference between that heat and the kind of heat that creates the vibration that makes you think, I think I got to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. Keeping your head on a swivel because there might be a jumper here. Who knows what's going to happen with this situation.
I've had to duck a few.
I've asked our friend Conrad Thompson this question, our good friend, and it's the one thing that I have wanted to know more than anything. Monday Night Wars, the biggest time in professional wrestling. We have WCW versus WWE. We have Vince McMahon heading the WWF, and we have you heading WCW. I literally thought this randomly a few months ago. I was like, I wonder, during that time, before you even had any relationship with WWEF going forward, did you and Vince ever just like, you know what, let's have dinner? Like, did that ever happen?
No. The closest thing I got to that was calling Vince's hotel in Las Vegas. There was a big convention, television convention. You may have been a part of NAPTI conventions back in the day. They used to be a big deal. They're not anymore. But they would have them either in New Orleans or Las Vegas or Miami, somewhere cool that people like to go. So this year, the NAPTI convention, national, whatever it is, it's television executive convention. It was in Vegas. And I had a friend there that worked for me, who also used to work for WWE. His name, he's since passed, but his name was Zane Breslov. Zane and I became super good friends. Zane had a lot of friends still in WWE, Ed Cohen and people like that from that era. So Zane knew Vince's schedule somehow through one of his contacts. He knew where Vince was staying in Las Vegas that weekend for the convention. So Zane didn't drink. He was a very active gambler, which is putting it really freaking mildly. But He didn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
I did, however, made up for him. So I was hanging out with Zane. I was in Vegas a day or two early, and I'm having a couple of beers and feeling pretty good. And Arrogant is, hell, because now I'm on a roll and Nitro's
Yep.
off and running, and
Yeah.
we're beating
Yeah.
WWE, and I'm just like walking around with my chin up in the air, daring people to take a swing at me.
Not feeling the vibrations. Not feeling the vibrations there. Yeah.
No,
You're
but
wanting it.
Zane and I are talking. He goes, "Hey, where was Vince staying? It was just down the street. It's one of the nicer hotels. I can't remember what the name of the hotel was, but Zane knew it. He goes, we should call and cancel his room because everybody's coming in from all over the country to this convention. I'm sure they made his reservation like months in advance. It was at Treasure Island Casino, and Zane knew the director at Treasure Island. So Zane calls up. He goes, should we cancel his room? I said, fuck yeah. I'll piss him off. Absolutely. It'll ruin his day. I want to keep him off balance as possible in every way I can. I want to get inside his head. So, and I did, really. I took out billboards right in front of Titan Towers for no other purpose. And so that when Vince came to work in the morning, he had to see my face. And when he left to go home at night, he had to see my face. I did shit like that. Just to fuck. It was kind of like a Sun Tzu art of war thing. If you can keep your opponent off balance and have him fighting on all fronts and he doesn't focus on much, that was my
You're
thought.
sending Turner Broadcasting merch to Titan Towers.
Not quite. That's too obvious.
That's too obvious.
That's cheapy. That won't get under his skin.
The huge billboard with your face isn't that obvious. That's not obvious. Who would have done that?
Come on, think bigger, go home. But anyway, we canceled Vince's hotel room for him. And I think I may have prank called him one time. I'm pretty sure I did. I got his number from somebody, and I thought, I'm just going to prank call him. And I called him, but he didn't answer his phone directly. His assistant did. And I left some smart-ass message. Not mean or disrespectful to her, but something that I knew she would be uncomfortable having to repeat to her boss. So I did that. And then I called him out and challenged him to a fight because I heard he was like, you challenge Vince to a fight, he's going to show up come hell or high water. I said, oh, yeah, really? Watch this. Hold my beer. And I called him out on television. He didn't show up.
Which just makes, I mean, in the end of that, it just makes you look huge by even doing that, because whether he shows up or not, you're still the one making that challenge on television.
And it wasn't so much that, because it was really fun because like Hulk Hogan and Randy pulled me aside, like when they heard what I was going to do, they each pulled, because I wasn't, I was just doing what I'm going to do. I didn't have to get it approved by anybody, but they had heard it, and they each pulled me aside separately. And, Randy's like, bro, man, if you really want to do that, because he's going to show up, bro, and he might tear you apart. Maybe. I don't care. I've been beat up for a lot less. And if he shows up and kicks my ass on my pay-per-view, I'm gold.
Exactly.
I'm gold. And if it goes the other way, I'm good too. So, when you're faced with an opportunity where if you win, you win. And if you lose, you're going to win it anyway. I'm in. I'll do that every time. All
right. To close it out, I always talk about pinch me moments. Every interview I have, I talk about pinch me moments from the person I'm talking to and having the chance to sit down with. You have legitimately worked everywhere in professional wrestling. It's
because I can't hold a job.
Worked with everyone in pro wrestling, outside of pro wrestling, Jay Leno's to Karl Malone's and Rodman's and everyone in between, celebrity wise too. What are some? Give me. I like because you've done everything. Give me a pinch me moment in wrestling, and give me a pinch me moment, kind of that's like outside the wrestling bubble, that come to mind. One where you go back and go, man, like, that 21-year-old Eric goes, hey, 97-year-old Eric, this is pretty cool.
Well, I mean, I'll start with the one moment, and it's both kind of in ring, out of ring. It's because of the ring. Let's put it that way. I'm going to be careful not to overstate this because in my enthusiasm and kind of gratitude for it, I can become sometimes effusive, which makes it sound bigger than it really was, and I don't mean to do that. But I got to become friends with Muhammad Ali. Not just get to meet Muhammad Ali, which would be an honor unto itself, quite frankly, but we became friends. And not close, don't want to suggest that, but it started when we went over to North Korea together. And actually it started before that. It started in Detroit at a pay-per-view, might have been a Starrcade, where we brought Muhammad Ali in, and he was part of the event, and we donated money to his charity, Turner Broadcasting did, and we made a big deal out of Muhammad Ali, and that was the first time that I met him. And in the process of meeting Muhammad, I really met his wife, Lonnie, that's how you got to Muhammad Ali. She was very, very protective of him. And through that process of getting him involved with WCW, I had an acquaintance with Lonnie, and I could make contact with her with regard to Muhammad pretty easily, directly. Antonio Inoki reached out to me because he saw that we had used Muhammad on one of our pay-per-view events. And at the same time, I'm working pretty closely with Inoki and key execs at New Japan. Inoki wanted to meet with Muhammad because they hadn't met face-to-face since they had their shoot fight.
Oh, wow.
Right? And Inoki wanted to kind of resurrect that relationship, and he had tried over the years to get in touch with Muhammad through whatever relationships he thought he had. None of them were working. So Inoki reached out to me and said, hey, can you help? I reached out to Lonnie, explained the situation. I met Muhammad and Lonnie in Denver. Inoki and his team flew in. Sonny Ono was with me. We all got together in Denver and did this sit-down interview for Inoki for Japanese television. I helped facilitate that, myself and Sonny Ono. That kind of created more of a relationship. And then shortly thereafter, in 95, Inoki puts together this idea for doing a North Korea Peace Festival, and he wanted Muhammad Ali to be there. So he again reached out to me to try to help facilitate this, and also asked me if I'd be willing to bring some WCW talent along with as part of its co-promotion, essentially. A very one-off because of the nature of it. But on that trip over, and I know this is a long story, but it's a good one. To me it is anyway. On that trip over, since I had kind of previously interfaced with Muhammad a little bit, professionally speaking, but on that trip over, you're on a plane for a long time. And when we got to Tokyo, we took a North Korean military transport plane from Tokyo to Pyongyang. And I got to sit next to Muhammad for a part of that flight. Others sat next to him as well. I think Road Warrior Animal Hawk sat next to him for a long time because I was sitting behind him and he was having a blast. But I got to spend some time, one-on-one time with Muhammad. And he told me how he came up with the persona of Cassius Clay. Because as a kid, he would go to the wrestling matches in Louisville and watch Gorgeous George. And he would see how people reacted to him. And that's what helped create that bombastic, braggadocious, cocky, loudmouth Cassius Clay character. It was all a word.
That's incredible.
And he told me his story about that and how it affected him when he was a kid and how it shaped his career. Now, here's where we fast forward. And this is the moment. And it's a touching one. And I sometimes break down when I try to recreate it. But now, after North Korea, maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, I bring my family to, actually New Japan brought my family to Japan with me to be a part of their big Tokyo Dome show. It was a big New Year's Eve show. And I didn't know it, but now Inoki had a direct contact with Muhammad, so he didn't have to go through me anymore. So I didn't know Muhammad was going to be there. So my wife and my 2 kids show up with me. Garrett, my son, is like 12, maybe, whatever he was. My daughter's a year or 2 younger, year and a half younger than that. So they're, preteens, but still very young. My wife's there with me. And I walk into the Tokyo Dome to the green room, and there's Muhammad with his photographer. And he saw me and I saw him, and there were a lot of people there, and everybody wanted, to get their picture with Muhammad and things. So it took a while for me to weave my way over to him. But by the time I did, people were kind of filtering around now and creating some space. And Muhammad and I sat down on the couch. This was either 97 or 98. And at this point, he could only whisper. Like, if he whispered, he was fairly articulate. If he tried to project, it didn't work. So when he talked, he had to lean in your ear to communicate. So we're sitting on the couch. My wife's across the room. She's looking, and Muhammad's talking to me as best he could. And he asked me, he said, "Did you see the Olympic ceremonies?" I said, "Well, of course I did." Shit, this is the part that gets me every time. Every time I tell the story. It's crazy. And I've told it 1,000 times, maybe 100. But he leaned into me and he said, "Do you think I embarrassed myself because of the Parkinson's?" And he was sincere. He wasn't sure. And he was curious if I thought that moment was less than. And I went the other way, as you could imagine. That was a pretty cool moment. Obviously still is.
That's awesome. We ain't getting better than that.
Yeah.
Here's the part. What an incredible one.
Here's the only thing that can make that story better is Howard Bingham, I think Howard has passed now. Howard Bingham had been Muhammad Ali's photographer for a long time. Neil Leffler, I think, was one of the early ones, and then Howard came in, and Howard was with us in North Korea, traveled with Muhammad Ali everywhere, took pictures of everything. And after Muhammad and I had our conversation, and there were, like I said, a lot of people wanted his time. I moved on. I'm talking to my wife, and I look over and I see my son Garrett. He's talking to Muhammad Ali like they've known each other forever.
That's incredible.
Keep in mind, as a kid, I grew up listening to Cassius Clay in some of his first fights on the radio because it wasn't available on television. Yeah. We listened to it on the radio with my dad. Now, fast forward, I'm looking over at my son just riffing with Muhammad Ali like they've known each other since he was born.
That's insane.
And I didn't know what they were talking about. I was across the room, and I looked over, and I see Howard is watching, and I see my son with a big grin on his face, and Muhammad's in his ear because that's the only way he could talk. And next thing I know, my son's grinning from ear to ear, and Muhammad gives my son a big hug, and Howard Bingham took a picture. And I thought to myself, I need that picture. Well, unfortunately, Howard took that picture with a different camera than his other camera, and Howard passed away. So I'm still trying to find that picture because if I do,
it's got to be out there somewhere.
It's there. It's there.
Yeah.
It's there, and I have contact with Howard's son, so we're trying to track it down. But that's whole moment that I just described still is my pinch me moment.
What a story! What a travel through time, and that always stayed with you, but always like that friendship built here and then lasted so vibrantly, like in his feelings too, to have that one-on-one conversation with that night with you. That's awesome.
And I mean, as I'm thinking, you said it best, Dylan. It's like the timeline, 1960, whenever 4.
Yeah.
Whenever Cassius Clay first broke out of the scene in a big way, Sonny Liston, that fight, whatever year that was, I might have been 8 or 9. And now and I always have been a fan of, I'm a very patriotic person. I am what I am, and I make no apologies for it. I try to be, I have grace. I think for myself and don't expect anybody to think
Mm-hmm.
like me. That being said, there's certain things that I hold really close to me. And when I've got a picture of Muhammad Ali in my office, in my normal studio. You'll see several pictures of Muhammad and I together, but one of them was a very special one that an artist in North Korea made of us while we were standing together on that trip. So that connection is real, even though Muhammad Ali, refused to go into the military. And people that think they know me were like, well, how can you believe this? And yet still hold Muhammad Ali in such a high esteem. It's the reason I hold him in such high esteem because his beliefs were honorable
Yeah.
and were real, and
Yep.
he lived his life accordingly. And I'll always have an understanding for that
Mm-hmm.
and room for that. In fact, I admire that. I wish we had more of that. People standing up and believing in their convictions and sacrificing for them, which is what nobody wants to sacrifice anything. Everybody wants everything to be easy. Comfort is a thief. Comfort is not your friend. Sometimes uncomfortable is the best friend you could possibly have because it brings out the best in you and the people around you. But for a lot of reasons, I just admire Muhammad so much, and to just have this lifetime kind of relationship that started out as just
It's wild.
a kid that
It's
was a
wild.
fan to a father that's watching his son interact is kind of a trip.
That's awesome. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Guys, let's talk about Mad Cat Beard Care. They make my beard feel soft, silky smooth, and they can do the same for yours. A one-man show since 2019, Mad Cat uses a portion of their sales to care for local stray cats. That money covers their medical bills and finds them safe spaces and forever homes. Their products are made to order with vitamins and all-natural oils that promote strong, healthy hair and moisturize your skin as well. They've got exclusive scents for myself, as well as other wrestlers like my good pal Brian Myers, Mr. Kennedy, and Ring of Honor legend Delirious. Make sure to check out all of their scents, along with my Swoggled scent, which has notes of lavender and sage. I absolutely love this scent. And guys, we've got an exclusive offer for listeners of Going Postl. Use promo code SWOGGLED to save yourself 15% on your orders only at madcatbeardcare.com. That is Swoggled with a D on the end to save yourself 15% on your orders at madcatbeardcare.com. Guys, that's 15% with promo code SWOGGLed, and remember, the Mad Cat makes a happy beard. All right, thanks again, once again, Eric Bischoff. Just a fun chat. Like, I really got the inner mindset of some of the most amazing things he's done in all of his time in wrestling, between WCW, WWE, and answered a lot of questions that maybe only I was wondering, but I hope you found interesting as well. I love talking to that guy. From the ideas behind Buffalo Bill, I love talking to that guy. From the ideas behind the beer to Road Wild and everything else that he's done, he's just a wealth of knowledge, and I absolutely love catching up with him. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. But one more time before we wrap things up, all forms of social media at Going Postl Pod, myself at Dylan Postl on all forms of social media, the free video version of this episode right here, youtube.com/Dylan Postl, ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle for all of the very, very best t-shirt designs that we've put out for this show and for myself in the wrestling world. ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle. But that's it. That is it for today. For this episode, this small talk. Guys, thank you very, very much for listening along. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed talking to the one and only Eric Bischoff. Spoiler alert for next episode. It's another small talk. Conrad Thompson is joining us for a small talk. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.